The emergency beacon pulsed weakly in the vast emptiness of space, its signal barely reaching the sensors of the cargo ship Horizon's Edge. James Harrison stood at the helm, his weathered hands hovering over the controls as he studied the distress call's origin. The abandoned research station hung against the backdrop of stars, its darkened windows telling a story of abandonment. Picking up minimal power readings, his first officer, Raven, reported from her station. Life support's still running, but barely. Want to call it in? James shook his head, his gray eyes fixed on the station. Something about this felt different from their usual salvage operations. We're already 2 days behind schedule. Might as well check it ourselves. The Horizon's Edge eased alongside the station, magnetic clamps engaging with a dull thud that resonated through the hull. James had spent 15 years running cargo through the outer colonies, long enough to know that abandoned stations usually meant good salvage, or trouble. The airlock cycled, and James led his small team aboard. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing pristine corridors that seemed untouched by the chaos usually found in abandoned stations. No signs of struggle, no hastily gathered belongings. Just silence. "This is wrong," Raven muttered, her dark skin catching the gleam of emergency lights. "Where is everyone?" The answer came in the form of a soft sound, barely perceptible, but distinct. A melody, haunting and beautiful, echoing through the station's empty halls. James felt it more than heard it, a sensation that tugged at something deep within his mind. They found her in the observation deck, surrounded by floating orbs of light that danced like stars. Her skin held an iridescent quality, shifting between pale blue and silver, marking her as Lemurian. But unlike any Lemurian James had ever seen, her patterns were irregular, chaotic, beautiful in their imperfection. She turned as they entered, her eyes wide with fear and something else. The floating lights vanished instantly, plunging the room into darkness save for their flashlights. James lowered his light, recognizing the terror in her posture. "We're not here to hurt you," he said softly, keeping his distance. "I'm James Harrison, captain of the Horizon's Edge. This is my first officer, Raven." The Lemurian woman studied them, her head tilted slightly. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality common to her species, but with an underlying tremor. "I am Thera, though that name no longer holds meaning among my people." James had heard of the Lemurians, a species known for their strict adherence to genetic purity and their incredible psychic abilities. They were rarely seen in human space, preferring isolation to interaction with other species. "The station's been abandoned for days," Raven said, her tone gentle but firm. "Why are you still here?" Thera's luminescent patterns flickered, a sign of emotional distress in her species. "They left me. My irregularities were discovered. I cannot control the voices, the lights. I am flawed." James felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen this before. Species that prized perfection above all else, discarding those who didn't meet their standards. "You're not flawed," he said, the words coming unbidden. "You're different. There's a distinction." Thera's patterns pulsed briefly, surprise evident in her expression. "You cannot understand. My kind requires harmony, perfect resonance. I create discord." As if to demonstrate, the lights around them flickered, and James felt a whisper of something brush against his mind. Fragments of thoughts and emotions not his own. Instead of fear, he felt fascination. The ability to touch minds was common among Lemurians, but this was different. Rawer, more real. "The station's dying," Raven interrupted, checking her handheld scanner. "Life support's got maybe 12 hours left." James made a decision then, one that would alter the course of multiple lives. "Come with us," he said to Thera. "We're headed to New Damascus. It's a free colony. All species, no questions asked." Thera's patterns swirled with uncertainty. "Your crew would accept one such as me. My crew accepts people based on who they are, not what others say they should be." James extended his hand, a human gesture of trust, He hoped she would understand. The choice is yours. For a long moment, Thera stood motionless, her iridescent patterns shifting through shades of blue and silver. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Her touch was cool, and James felt that same whisper in his mind. But this time, it carried hope. As they led her back to the horizon's edge, James couldn't help but wonder about the chain of events he'd just set in motion. The Lemurians weren't known for letting go of their own, even those they rejected. But looking at Thera's expression of wonder as she boarded his ship, he knew he'd made the right choice. 3 days into their journey to New Damascus, the Horizon's Edge encountered the first real test of its newest passenger. James stood in the cargo hold, watching as Thera traced her fingers over the hull plating, her iridescent patterns creating shifting shadows in the dim light. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked, not turning around. The solar storm approaching. James hadn't mentioned the storm warnings they'd received an hour ago. "How did you know?" Thera's patterns rippled with something like amusement. "The radiation sings to me. Different frequencies, different harmonies. Your ship's sensors detect it, but I feel it in my essence." The ship's intercom crackled. "Captain to the bridge." Raven's voice carried an edge of urgency. "Storm's picking up faster than predicted." In the bridge, the sensor displays painted a grim picture. The storm had grown from a minor disturbance to a Class 3 event in less than an hour. Red warning indicators flashed across multiple screens. "Alternative routes?" James asked, though he already knew the answer. "None within range," Raven replied, her fingers dancing over the controls. "We burned too much fuel trying to go around. Have to push through." Thera stood silently in the doorway, her patterns pulsing in rhythm with the ship's warning lights. "I could help," she said softly. Both James and Raven turned to look at her. They'd seen hints of her abilities over the past few days. Objects moving without touch, lights responding to her emotions. But this was different. "The storm," she continued, moving closer to the viewport. "I can feel its patterns, its flows, like music written in radiation and magnetic fields. I could guide us through." James studied her face. "It's dangerous for you." "Everything I do is dangerous," Thera replied with a bitter smile. "It's why my people feared me. But here, now, my discord might become harmony." A violent shudder ran through the ship as the first wave of the storm hit them. James made his decision. "Show us." Thera moved to the center of the bridge, her patterns beginning to glow brighter. She raised her hands, and James felt that now familiar whisper in his mind grow stronger. But this time, it carried images, streams of radiation, magnetic eddies, safe passages hidden within the chaos. "There," she said, her voice taking on an ethereal quality. "Follow the path I show you." James took the helm himself, letting Thera's guidance flow through him. The ship moved like a dancer through the storm, weaving between violent eruptions of solar energy. Where their sensors showed only chaos, Thera saw patterns, possibilities. Hours passed in tense concentration. Thera never faltered, though her glow dimmed with fatigue. James followed her mental suggestions with increasing confidence, trusting her abilities more with each successful maneuver. The crew watched in amazement as their ship navigated one of the worst solar storms in recent memory without so much as a scorched panel. When they finally emerged on the other side, a spontaneous cheer erupted on the bridge. Thera swayed, her patterns flickering weakly. James caught her before she could fall, helping her to a seat. "Thank you," he said simply. She looked up at him, surprise evident in her expression. "You're not afraid of what I can do?" "Afraid?" Raven laughed, checking the ship's systems. "You just saved us weeks of detour time, and probably the entire cargo. Captain, we need to give her a permanent position." James saw the hope bloom in Thera's patterns before she could hide it. "You would want me to stay. The Horizon's Edge could use someone with your talents," James said carefully, not wanting to pressure her. "But more than that, we could use someone with your heart. You didn't just navigate the storm. You worked with us, trusted us to follow your lead. Thera's patterns shifted to a deep, warm blue he hadn't seen before. Trust. It is not something my people gave easily, or received. But here, she gestured to the bridge to the crew. Here I feel something different. A harmony I never knew existed. Different kinds of harmony, James agreed. Not perfect, not always in tune, but real. That's what makes it beautiful. The next few days showed a subtle but significant change in Thera. She began spending more time with the crew, learning their jobs, sharing meals in the common area. Her powers, once a source of shame, became a valuable tool in the ship's operations. She could sense mechanical problems before they appeared, navigate complex spatial phenomena, even help calm the occasional passenger having a rough transit. But it was the small moments that meant the most. The way she laughed at Raven's terrible jokes, her fascination with human music, her quiet conversations with James about the nature of belonging. She was building something she'd never had before, a home where her differences were celebrated, not condemned. As they approached New Damascus, James realized he didn't want to let her go. Not just because of her abilities, but because she had become part of their peculiar family. Yet he knew the choice had to be hers. The horizon's edge had become a sanctuary, but she deserved the freedom to choose her own path. The peace Thera had found aboard the horizon's edge shattered with the arrival of 3 Lemurian vessels in New Damascus's orbit. James stood at the viewport, watching their sleek ships gleam in the starlight, their crystalline hulls refracting colors that reminded him of Thera's patterns. "They're here for me," Thera said quietly, joining him at the window. Her patterns had dulled to a muted gray, fear dampening their usual vibrancy. The Council would never send 3 ships merely to investigate. James turned to face her. "You don't have to meet with them. New Damascus has strict sovereignty laws. They can't force you to go anywhere." Before Thera could respond, Raven's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Lemurian flagship. They're requesting permission to board." The word requesting carried heavy irony. James knew, as did everyone else, that the Lemurians rarely requested anything. They demanded, and the galaxy usually complied. "Your choice," James said to Thera. "We can deny them. Leave orbit. Find another port." Thera's patterns shifted through shades of blue and silver as she considered. "No," she finally said. "Running will only prove what they believe, that I am dangerous, uncontrolled. I must face them." The Lemurian delegation arrived with all the ceremony their species was known for. 3 tall figures stepped onto the horizon's edge, their patterns flowing in perfect synchronization, a display of the harmony they prized so highly. Their leader, who introduced himself as High Counselor Verix, fixed his gaze on Thera with an expression that mixed disgust with something like fear. "The aberration lives," Verix said, his musical voice carrying none of the warmth James had come to associate with Thera's. "You were meant to be lost with the station, to fade quietly and preserve our people's purity." James felt his fists clench, but Thera stepped forward before he could speak. "I chose to live," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling patterns. "And I have found a place where my differences bring strength, not shame." "Strength," another counselor scoffed. "Your uncontrolled abilities are a threat to the very fabric of our society. You cannot contain the chaos within you." As if to prove their point, the ship's lights flickered in response to Thera's rising emotions. But instead of shrinking away as she once would have, she stood taller. "You call it chaos because you don't understand it," she said. "These humans, they saw beyond their fear. They helped me see that different harmonies can exist together, create something new and beautiful." Verix's patterns darkened. "You speak of beauty while consorting with lesser beings. Your corruption runs deeper than we feared." He turned to James. "Captain Harrison, you harbor a dangerous element. Her powers are unstable, unpredictable. She should never have been allowed to survive." "Funny," James replied, his voice cold. "The only danger I've seen is from those who'd rather kill someone different than try to understand them." You know nothing of our ways, the third counselor interjected. Our society requires perfect harmony. Aberrations like her threaten everything we've built. Perfect harmony. Thera laughed, the sound carrying a bitter edge. You mean perfect control. But look at what your fear of difference has cost you. She raised her hands, and suddenly the air around them filled with dancing lights, complex patterns that moved in stunning synchronization. You see chaos, but I see possibilities you never imagined. The counselors stepped back, their patterns showing clear alarm. But James noticed something else. Crew members gathering at the edges of the room, watching Thera's display with wonder rather than fear. The aberration proves our point, Varix declared. Such displays are precisely why. Her name is Thera, James interrupted, stepping forward. And she's crew on this ship. Under both New Damascus law and interstellar shipping regulations, that makes her under my protection. You want her, you'll have to go through official channels. You would challenge the Lumerian Council. Varix's patterns pulsed with indignation. No, Thera said softly. He's protecting his own, just as you claim to do. The difference is, he protects through acceptance, not fear. The lights she had created began to fade, but their impact remained. James watched as confusion rippled through the counselors' patterns. They had expected to find a broken exile, not someone who had found strength in her difference. This isn't over, Varix warned. The council will not allow an aberration to threaten our way of life. Your way of life, Thera corrected, not mine. Not anymore. After the counselors departed, James found Thera in the observation deck, her pattern swirling with troubled colors. They'll come back, she said without turning. With more ships, more demands. I've put you all in danger. You've given us a chance to stand for something worth fighting for, James replied. The crew's already talking about organizing a defense fund, reaching out to advocacy groups. You're not alone in this. Thera's patterns shifted, hope threading through the worry. Why? Why risk so much for one different being? Because that's what humanity does best, James smiled. We look at something different and see possibilities instead of threats. And right now, we see someone worth standing beside. News traveled fast in the space lanes. Within days of the Lumerian Council's visit, the Horizon's Edge began receiving messages from across human space. Some were from other ships offering support, others from research institutes interested in Thera's unique abilities. But most surprisingly, they heard from other Lumerian outcasts, ones who had hidden their differences for years. James found Thera in the ship's hydroponics bay, tending to the plants with her abilities. Under her care, the usually struggling garden had flourished, each plant responding to her gentle psychic touch. The lights she created seemed to feed them in ways the artificial grow lamps couldn't match. The Stellar Sciences Institute sent another request, he said, watching a vine curl toward Thera's glowing patterns. They're offering to sponsor your residency application. Full citizenship rights. Thera's patterns flickered thoughtfully. And protection from the council. Legal protection, at least. Though I suspect that's not what the council will try first. James leaned against the doorframe. We've picked up increased Lumerian traffic in the sector. They're building something. Political pressure, maybe military. They fear what they cannot control, Thera said softly, her patterns dimming. And I represent their greatest fear, change. The ship's alert system interrupted their conversation. Raven's voice came through urgent but controlled. Captain to the bridge. Multiple ships just dropped out of FTL. Lumerian signatures. When James and Thera reached the bridge, the tactical display showed 5 Lumerian vessels arranged in a ceremonial formation. It was no diplomatic visit this time. It was a show of force. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, Raven reported. Want me to put it through? James nodded, and High Counselor Varix's voice filled the bridge. Attention Horizon's Edge. You harbor a threat to Lumerian society. Surrender the aberration, or face the consequences of defying council authority. Before James could respond, Other voices joined the channel. A gruff female voice cut through first. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the independent freighter Star Runner. We're picking up your broadcast, and we're not liking the threats." Another voice chimed in. "Merchant vessel Diamond Path here. The Horizon's Edge has our support." More voices followed. Independent ships, research vessels, even a few patrol boats from New Damascus. They had been monitoring the situation, waiting. Now they moved to surround the Horizon's Edge, creating an impromptu defense fleet. "Your coral isn't just with us anymore," James broadcast back to the Lemurian ships. "Seems like a lot of people have opinions about hunting down someone just for being different." Thera stepped forward, her patterns bright with emotion. "Let me speak to them." James hesitated only a moment before nodding. This was her fight after all. "My people," Thera's voice carried across the channels, strong and clear. "You speak of harmony, of purity, but look at what stands before you. Humans who have every reason to fear difference. Instead, embrace it. They see strength in diversity, possibility in change." Her patterns began to pulse, and the ship's systems responded. Displays flickered, but instead of chaos, they showed complex, beautiful patterns, the same ones that had so alarmed the Council before, but now coordinated across multiple ship systems. "You call me aberration, but I am evolution. What you fear is chaos. I have learned to shape into new forms of harmony, and I am not alone." As if in response to her words, other patterns appeared, subtle distortions in space, whispers of power that shouldn't have been possible. Among the ships defending them were other Lemurian outcasts, hiding no longer. The Lemurian fleet's perfect formation wavered. "Your society stands at a crossroads," Thera continued. "You can continue to fear change, to cast out those who are different, or you can learn what these humans have shown me. That true strength lies in accepting and celebrating our differences." For a long moment, silence filled the channels. Then, remarkably, one of the Lemurian ships broke formation. Its patterns shifted, broadcasting support for Thera's words. Then another followed. High Counselor Varix's voice returned, tight with barely controlled rage. "This defiance will not stand. The Council will not. The Council will adapt." A new voice interrupted, older, carrying authority. "Or it will be replaced." A new ship dropped out of FTL, its design ancient but unmistakably Lemurian. On the bridge of the Horizon's Edge, Thera's patterns flared in recognition. "Elder Matriarch Silera," she whispered. She was legendary for advocating change before she disappeared. The Elder Matriarch's ship moved between the Council fleet and the Defenders. "I have watched from the shadows, gathering evidence of our society's stagnation. This moment, this convergence of species standing together against persecution, proves what I have long claimed. Our future lies not in rigid purity, but in embracing evolution." The Council ships began to retreat, their perfect formation dissolving. They couldn't challenge the words of an elder matriarch, not publicly. Not yet. As the tension broke, cheers erupted across the channels. Ships began broadcasting congratulations, support, offers of alliance. But James watched Thera, saw her patterns shift through complex emotions. "You've started something," he said quietly. "Something bigger than just your story." Thera nodded, her patterns settling into a steady, determined glow. Change was always coming. They just needed someone to show them it wasn't something to fear. 6 months after the standoff in New Damascus space, the Horizon's Edge docked at the newly established Harmony Station. The space station, a joint venture between human and Lemurian engineers, hung in space like a crystalline flower, its design blending the organic flow of Lemurian architecture with the practical efficiency of human construction. James watched Thera prepare for her presentation to the first-ever joint Human-Lemurian Scientific Council. Her patterns flowed with nervous energy, creating small dancing lights that reflected off the station's curved walls. "You know," he said, adjusting his formal uniform, "when I found you on that abandoned station, I never imagined we'd end up here." Thera's patterns sparkled with amusement. Making history or wearing uncomfortable formal attire? Both, he chuckled. Though I'm more concerned about my speech than the uniform. The chamber where the council gathered represented everything the last 6 months had achieved. Humans and Lemurians sat together, their differences obvious but no longer dividing them. Elder Matriarch Silara had been true to her word, using her influence to push for reforms in Lemurian society. It hadn't been easy. Change never was, but the presence of both species in this room proved it was possible. Thera took the center platform, her patterns bright and steady. The lights in the chamber dimmed, allowing her natural luminescence to command attention. James watched with pride as she began her presentation. "What you are about to see," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people, but tempered with the directness she'd learned from humans, "is not chaos. It is not an aberration. It is evolution. The next step in understanding the fundamental forces that shape our universe." The air around her came alive with lights and patterns, but unlike her previous displays, these were focused, purposeful. Data streamed through the air in beautiful configurations, showing how her unique abilities could detect spatial anomalies, navigate dangerous phenomena, and even heal organic matter at the cellular level. Working with human scientists, we've discovered that what the Council once feared as unstable power is actually a deeper connection to the quantum fabric of space itself, and I am not alone in this gift. At her signal, other Lemurians who had come out of hiding stepped forward, each demonstrating their own unique variations of ability. Some could manipulate energy in ways previously thought impossible. Others could communicate across vast distances without technology. "Humanity taught me that difference is not weakness," Thera continued. "They showed me that true harmony comes not from enforced uniformity, but from the symphony of diverse voices working together. And now we offer this knowledge back to both our peoples." The presentation concluded with a demonstration that left the chamber in awed silence. Thera and the other evolved Lemurians working in concert with human scientists to create a new form of faster-than-light navigation. It was something neither species could have achieved alone. After the formal proceedings, James found Thera in their favorite spot on the station, a viewing area where the stars seemed close enough to touch. Her patterns had settled into the deep, content blue he'd come to associate with her happiest moments. "The Council approved all the proposals," he said, joining her at the viewport. "Full rights for evolved Lemurians, joint research programs, everything you fought for." "Everything we fought for," she corrected, her patterns brightening. "I would never have found the courage to stand up without you, without the crew showing me that being different didn't mean being wrong." James smiled. "You know, humans have a saying, the stars are not meant to hold us apart, but to show us how far we can go together." Thera's patterns shifted in curiosity. "I've never heard that saying." "That's because I just made it up," he admitted with a grin. Seemed fitting for the moment. Her laugh filled the space around them with dancing lights. "You humans and your endless creativity, always finding new ways to express old truths." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The horizon's edge would head out again soon. There were always new cargo runs to make, new worlds to connect. But now they carried something more precious than goods: hope, in the form of proof that difference could unite rather than divide. "What next?" Thera asked, her patterns swirling with possibilities. James gestured to the vast expanse before them. "That's the beauty of it. We get to decide. Together." The station slowly rotated, bringing new constellations into view. Somewhere out there, other outcasts were finding their way to acceptance. Other species were learning to embrace change rather than fear it. And it had started with a simple choice: to see beauty in difference, to offer help instead of judgment. The lights of Harmony Station reflected off the viewport, mingling with Thera's patterns to create new colors, new possibilities. It was, James thought, the perfect metaphor for their journey. Different kinds of light, coming together to illuminate the way forward. Beyond the stars, the future waited, full of promise and possibility. and they would face it as they had faced everything else, standing together, proving that the greatest adventures begin when we dare to be different.